Welcome to State of the State. My name is Richard August, and I'll be the host of this edition, which is dedicated to the memory of Carol Ann Munford, who died on July 19th after a recurrence of cancer. The State of the State family and all Rhode Islanders have lost an exceptional person and public servant. Carol was a State of the State moderator. She was also a state representative, member of the Rhode Island Republican Central Committee, Scituate Republican Town Committee, Republican National Committee woman, and Carol also served on many boards of directors for both profit and nonprofit organizations and much more. The State of the State family shall miss you immensely, Carol. Rest in peace. Our guests this evening are two candidates for the current seat held by Congressman Cicilline for the 1st Congressional District in Rhode Island. My guests are Stan Tran, who is a Brown medical student on leave while he pursues this campaign. He is also a graduate of Stanford University, where he did his pre-med degree. And also, my guest is Cormac B. Lynch, who is a Marine, former Marine who served in Iraq. He is a native of Newport, Rhode Island. He was an East Providence firefighter when he returned from Iraq, and after suffering an injury, could no longer pursue that profession, and so he returned to school full-time at the University of Delaware and received a bachelor's degree in finance in 2011. After leaving the University of Delaware, Cormac joined J.P. Morgan in New York City as a private equity analyst. In the fall of 2013, Cormac left Wall Street to start his own company and pursue a new nonprofit organization to support education initiatives among combat veterans. Welcome, gentlemen, to State of the State.
Thank you very much for having us.
Ladies and gentlemen, both of these gentlemen are candidates for the same seat, but this is not going to be a debate format. What I'm going to do is just offer certain areas of national interest, because they are running for Congress, and allow each of them to respond so that you can become familiar with their positions. Is that okay?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to talk to you about the issue of immigration. As you know, we are facing what is termed a crisis on the southern border, with literally hundreds of thousands of people coming across, primarily in Texas, but many of these are young children who are arriving unaccompanied. The governor of Texas seems to have taken some steps, but of course his powers are limited. The federal government seems to be dithering about the whole thing. Stan, your family immigrated from Vietnam after the communist takeover there.
That's correct.
So you certainly have an interest in immigration, and I'd like to have you respond to what you think that crisis is about and what can be done about it.
So I think America is a country that's built on immigrants, and immigration has been very important in building the country that we are today. But when we talk about immigration, it's important to differentiate between legal immigration and illegal immigration. Legal immigration is what we want. For example, in this state, we have Johnson Wales University. We have students coming in from the country who stay and live in the state for 4 years. Some of them have business ideas that they want to pursue after graduation, but they can't stay because they can't get those visas because of all the illegal immigrants coming into this country. And so we want people to come in, but we want them to do so legally. So that means everyone has to go through, fill out the proper paperwork, and go through the pipeline. So the first step to allowing legal immigrants is to stop the flow of illegal immigrants, and that means securing our borders. If we don't secure our borders, every 5 or 10 years we have this issue where we have a flood of illegal immigrants and we don't know what to do with them.
Okay, Cormac?
Thank you, Mr. August. Certainly immigration is a topic that's turned into a political football, but I do think it's important to point out that our immigrants make this country and have made this country what it is today. 40% of the American Fortune 500 was either founded by immigrants or sons and daughters of immigrants. We want to encourage an effective immigration policy because it will only make America stronger. Allowing undocumented children to pass through a porous border with no sustainable plan in place following that does nothing to benefit the country. It's irresponsible, it's ineffective, in what has started as an immigration crisis is now turning into a public health crisis and a national security issue. First things first, we need to stop the problem from continuing to happen. We need to secure the border. It's not just an immigration issue, it's a national security issue. And that specific component of it, we need to approach with a sense of urgency. We can debate how we choose to outline the path to citizenship, but first things first, even in this isolated political atmosphere, we need to secure the border.
Okay. So that would be the first thing, and then you'd have to find a way to integrate these people, or are you suggesting that we have to send them home?
I wouldn't be for that. I think we need to adopt a multi-tiered approach. I think first things first, we need to secure the border. Second, we need to exhaust our diplomatic efforts. We need to work with these local host governments and make sure the information is passed to the children that they shouldn't be coming to the American border with false information that they're going to come here and be able to stay here, because we're a nation of laws and we're going to have the backbone to enforce those laws. The ones that have been here, I do think we have an obligation to treat them humanely, but we must treat them humanely temporarily. I think we need to set up logistics that care for their temporary needs, but we do need to repatriate them back to their home countries.
Yeah, so on the people already here, again, it's important to address the issue at the border before we would talk about what to do with the population here. I mean, otherwise you have an influx of children who hear rumors that if you get in before a certain date, then you can stay. And so that needs to stop. But the people who have been here for 5 years, 20 years, and have children here, there are 12 million thereabouts. We don't know for sure because they're undocumented, so we don't have those numbers. But the estimates range anywhere between like 9 million to 17 million. So it's something like 12 million people. And that's about the population the size of Ohio. And so it's not realistic to deport 12 million people from this country. And so we need to say that if you've been here for more than 3 years or 5 years or something, then there's some kind of amnesty program that you can get documented and have a path to legal citizenship, that there's a way for you to become a citizen just like everyone else who wants to become a citizen. But if you've been here for a couple months or you just got into the border or across the border, I don't think those people should be allowed to stay.
The economy, of course, is a prime topic for every candidate. I think everyone that I've interviewed, including a gentleman who's running for town dog catcher, is going to create jobs. So I'd like to know, first of all, Cormac, what do you think the government's role is in creating jobs, and what would you think has to be done to stimulate the economy so jobs are created?
They don't have a role in creating jobs. They facilitate an environment where we can drive private sector investment, and that private sector creates the job. And what the government can do is get rid of the red tape and stay out of the way. I think that's what the best thing they can do right now, because they have intruded into small businesses, into corporations on unprecedented levels over the course of the past 6 years since Obama took office. When the president is hiring and firing a CEO of a company, as the president of the United States did with General Motors, that's not the capitalist society that America is supposed to be. So I think we should take that very seriously, and I think the prime role of the next congressman will be to facilitate that environment and to keep the government at bay. And I think Rhode Island's highest unemployment rate, their rating by both Forbes and CNBC as the least competitive state to conduct businesses, is indicative of that.
Stan?
So I think there are two reasons why the unemployment rate in this state is the highest in the country. One is the corruption that's rampant in this state. And that's that's mostly because one party rules the state. And this country was set up to be to have multiple parties. We had the electoral college system, which is a system that's designed to work with many political parties. In this state, of the 75 state legislators, 69 are Democrats and 6 are Republican. So there's no check and balances. When the Attorney General is the same party as the governor, not right now, but the same party as many of the politicians in the state, the Attorney General's job is to be a check and balance and to look into corruption, but if they're in the same political party, that makes it more difficult. So for example, if you're a business owner in Providence and you want to get a license to sell liquor, to serve liquor, there was a scandal where you had to pay a city council member $5,000 to get that. that's the sort of thing that makes it difficult to do business and makes it more expensive to do business. With the corruption that we have, we can't provide basic services, things like keeping the sidewalks clear of snow, keeping the street lights on, filling the potholes. I've complained about the street lights not being on for 3 years, and they haven't fixed it yet. And I think, they didn't tell me why, but I assume it's because they have no money because of mismanagement. So as a business, do you want to come into a place that's on the verge of bankruptcy, that can't provide the basic services? Or do you want to move somewhere that you can count on the government helping you, providing the basic infrastructure so you can have your business? So that's the first reason. The second reason is that we don't have a skilled workforce, a workforce here with the right skills to fulfill those needs. The reality of the situation in this state is that most kids who go to college drop out in the first year. So we're pushing kids to go to college. High school teachers are doing that, guidance counselors are doing that, and kids aren't finishing, and we're doing them a disservice. So they have debt, they can't find a job, and they have no backup plan. So the solution to that is to have vocational training in high school. Shop classes has been squeezed out because with the pressure to get kids to college, if you don't do well, they make you take remedial English, remedial math class, so there's no more room for shop class. And as a kid who doesn't have an interest in school, forcing them to go to college doesn't make sense. You need to give them something that they're interested in, and we have a need in this state, in this country, for people with those skills, right? Blue-collar workers are no longer respected in our society because we associate those with low skill, low wages, and that's not true. Being a good carpenter, a good plumber, takes years and years of training to become good, and they make 6 figures. A plumber will make 6 figures here in Providence if you're skilled, because there's a need for them. So in this country, in this state, we still need those people, and we need to have our education system reflect those needs.
I'm going to turn to foreign policy, and Cormac, you served in Iraq, and certainly the situation we see taking place in the Middle East is of great concern. Iraq and Syria, which is related somewhat, right, is obviously in turmoil. The Islamic movement has encompassed parts of Syria and northern Iraq.
Yep.
They're driving Christians out of Mosul. They seem to be imposing Sharia law. Our administration doesn't seem to be doing anything. We drew a line in the sand in Syria, for example. Assad clearly crossed that line when he began.
Right.
So, as a congressman, what would be your view of a policy change, or should the policy change in the Middle East, specifically Iraq and Syria?
Absolutely. Specifically with the red line, if you're going to draw it, have the backbone to hold it firm, right? I think Congress needs to do a much better job of being an effective mechanism of oversight to I would use the word dangerous precedent with our foreign policy right now. I'm not saying my party isn't to blame somewhat, specifically with what happened in Iraq. But I think the Obama administration's exit from Iraq was as irresponsible as the Bush administration's entrance to it. Both of which are unacceptable, both of which have done a disservice to that country and to this one.
And Stan, I'm going to ask you to talk about the situation we have in the Ukraine and Russia. Before I came in to tape this show, there was a report that our State Department has acknowledged that Russia has actually begun to lob artillery fire into Ukraine. And I'm not talking about the militants, I'm talking about Russian artillery. Yeah, and so clearly this is becoming a flashpoint and a real problem for us. And I'm wondering if, as a congressman, you would have anything to offer the president as to how we work out of this.
I think the job of a politician when it comes to foreign policy is to educate and be honest with the voters, with the constituents here, why we're involved. In some cases, we're involved because it's a moral imperative. Say there's a genocide going on, then we should, if we could get in there and prevent thousands of people of dying, then we have a moral imperative to do that. Sometimes we get involved because it's in our national interest. And if that's the case, we should be honest and clear about why we're getting involved. In the situation in Ukraine, it's important to look at history. Ukraine is situated between Europe and Russia. And so throughout the course of history, they've been conflicted between the two sides. During World War II, for example, some Ukrainians were with Hitler and the Nazis because they were opposed to Stalin, and some people were with Russia. So as long as we can remember, for hundreds of years, Ukraine has been conflicted. And currently that's the reason why we're in this situation today. There was a protest, a pro-EU protest, but then the government was more allied to Russia, and that led to the conflict that precipitated today. And currently, there's two factions going on: a pro-Western faction and pro-Russian faction. And so the root of the matter is that the people there are conflicted because of where they're located, and an armed intervention by the United States isn't going to fix that. Having said that, what Russia is doing is unacceptable. Providing these sorts of, we don't know for sure yet, but all the evidence is pointing to the fact that Russia has provided the anti-air missile that brought down the Malaysian jetliner. And now with the reports of them getting actively involved in this war, that's not acceptable for them to do that, because they need to respect the sovereignty of the Ukraine and let the Ukrainian people decide what they want. And so with the downing of the jetliner, I think the international community is turning against Russia. And so I think we can work with many other countries around the world to impose tough sanctions on Russia. And if the whole world gets together and joins together in this voice, then we can effectively isolate Russia from the rest of the world, and that's a powerful tool. So I'm hesitant to go into an armed conflict with Russia, but I think if we work in terms of diplomacy and work with other countries on this, because it's not just us that are outraged, the whole world is, we can impose some hard, very difficult sanctions on Russia.
Okay. The federal budget deficit and the national debt are truly issues that concern all of us. And if and when you get elected to Congress, you'll certainly have to wrestle with those issues. Cormac, how would you, with your financial background especially, how would you address the problem of the growing deficit, the growing debt and the deficit?
In its simplest terms, we need to spend less than we take in more than we spend, right? In its simplest terms. I think that requires a morally sound representative to be honest with the people. It's a simple fix that's overcomplicated by career politicians who don't want to acknowledge the issues at hand. Specifically, areas where we could make those cuts, our military, we're in 167 countries right now, and we can't win a war in one. And I need to be crystal clear about this. It's because of the leadership at the highest levels of our government. We have the largest, most well-funded petroleum-based military the world has ever known. We spend more on national security than the next 23 countries in the world combined. We have the men and women on the ground that are the most, that execute our strategy honorably and are the best any nation could ask for. I can tell you that, as well as I can tell you the sky's blue and the grass is green. However, it's still taken us 13 years and counting to win a war in Afghanistan. However, Vladimir Putin is still shooting civilian aircraft out of the sky outside Russia. However, there was a red line that was still drawn and passed in Syria. It doesn't matter if we have the strongest military in the world. We need to have morally sound representatives that back that up. And we can't even secure our own border right now. So I think we need to see where there's an imminent national security threat in our theaters throughout the globe and keep a presence there. And if there's not, we need to start bringing our military home. That's not what we're doing. We're cutting our Department of Defense by keeping that presence right now and cutting our standing army. We're cutting our standing army to dangerously low levels. We're taking it to from 550,000 to below 400, and we have not seen those levels since prior to World War II. The best source for peace is strength, and weakness attracts aggression. And if you don't think Vladimir Putin is watching as we do that, and if you think that's not emboldening him and our other adversaries as it's confusing our allies, such as Israel in the Middle East, that's certainly the case, and it has to be changed.
Stan?
So the question was about solving the national deficit. And the first question you have to ask in solving that problem is, where is the money going? So the number one spending that the federal government and the state government spends on is healthcare. And healthcare is such a large piece of the pie that it's larger than the national defense. It's larger than what we spend on education. It's larger than what we spend on farm subsidies and SNAP benefits, food stamp benefits. In fact, healthcare is larger than all those things combined. And so if you want to make a dent in the national deficit, we start with healthcare. And the fact of the matter is that in this country, we spend the most for healthcare of any country and have the worst outcomes. So there's a lot of room for improvement. We can start, as a medical student, I've seen our healthcare system and seen the inefficiencies firsthand. I understand the needs of the patients, and I have specific ideas on how to make healthcare more affordable and provide better coordination of care. So I have many ideas, but let me just give you one idea in the interest of time. So in Rhode Island here, we have many different hospitals in close proximity. So for example, in Providence, you have Roger Williams Hospitals, the Veterans Administration Hospital, Miriam, Rhode Island Hospital, Women and Infants, Hasbro, Memorial Hospital.
Fatima.
Fatima, that's right, in North Providence. Thank you. And as a patient, I often go to multiple hospitals because they're so close. You might see a cardiologist here, like a heart doctor here, and a primary care doctor here. And the records don't transfer between the different systems. So as a healthcare provider, when I see a patient for the first time, I have to work them up from scratch. So I ask them all the basic questions like, where do you live? Anything runs in your family? And I order all the basic tests, all the basic x-rays, scans, and blood tests. And even if that person was just seen a month ago at the hospital a mile away from me, I don't have access to that information, so I have to do it all over again. That slows down care. It increases costs. It exposes patients to twice the amount of radiation and needle sticks that they have to be, that they need to be. And so that's not efficient. It's bad care and it's expensive. Now the problem is that some people benefit from that, the people who provide those services. So the incentives are a little perverse, and the people who provide those incentives or provide the healthcare actually donate a lot of money to politicians. The healthcare lobby is the largest lobby in DC. And so if we want to solve the national deficit and get the cost of healthcare down, the first step is to stand up to the special interests and say, look, we have to do what's right for patients and not what makes money for these people. And as someone in the healthcare field, someone who understands how to care for patients, I think I'd be a great advocate in office for that.
I'm going to ask Cormac to address the issue of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. Stan obviously has a perspective as a medical student. What do you think we should do about this? This has clearly been a ill-conceived and ill-implemented program. There's plenty of problems. As a congressman, what do you want to do about Obamacare? Can it be fixed? Or?
Right, it's ill-conceived, ill-implemented, but also par for the course at this point, right? Unfortunately, I think it's here to stay, and we need to reform it into a tool that works for the American people rather than against the American people. I think we can do that a couple of different ways. I think we need to allow insurance companies to compete across state lines to help drive down the cost. In essence, we need to make the Affordable Care Act actually affordable, right? 4.7 million Americans lost their health care plan during the passage of this. The Congressional Budget Office said the average premium for family plans went up $2,100. So we need to dig into the details and look for ways to save money on this, specifically with small businesses here in Rhode Island, because that's who it's hurt the most financially. And I think we need to look into start allowing small businesses to pool their insurance plans together so they can get some of the competitive rates that bigger businesses do.
Would you like to add anything to that discussion of Obamacare? We have a few minutes left.
So I think the problem with Obamacare is that it's too expensive. Healthcare was too expensive before Obamacare. It's too expensive today. Obamacare promised to fix that with the Affordable Care Act, that's what it's called, and healthcare hasn't been affordable yet. And that's the root cause of the problem. If healthcare was cheap, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. Right? There are patients who I see who cut their pills in half or don't take their medication because they can't afford to do so. And Americans pay the most for prescription medication of any country. That needs to change. We can get the cost down if we stand up to special interests and break the monopoly that the pharmaceutical industry has on this country. We should allow patients to buy medication from wherever it's cheapest, and that may be a place like Canada where prices are half as much. So we need to make fixes to Obamacare to make it more affordable for patients.
We have about 5 minutes left, and what I'm going to do is allow each of you a couple of minutes to explain to the voters why they should support your candidacy in the primary in September. And I'm going to allow, since you went, I'll allow Cormac to go first.
Of course. My name's Cormac Lynch. I'm a born and bred native Rhode Islander. I'm the endorsed Republican candidate for this office. I left a broken home when I was young. I enlisted in the Marine Corps at age 19. I have one tour to Fallujah, Iraq. That was the experience of a lifetime. That experience made me the man I am today, and that's certainly the bread and butter of my candidacy. I think at its core, on a variety of levels, from our foreign policy to our tepid response in Syria and in Ukraine, to the 40 veterans who died waiting for health care on a VA list in April, our government does not respect its service members, and they do not understand the trials and the tribulations that our fine men and women in uniform. And I think we need to hold them accountable for it, and I certainly think I'm the man for the job. I come from nothing. I've worked in a union before. I went to college on the GI Bill. I'm a self-made man. I'm a common man. I understand the needs of the working class more so than anyone, even on the Democratic ticket, and I look forward to representing you in Washington.
Thank you. Stan?
Great, thanks. My name is Stan Tran, and I'm a medical student at Brown University right now. Before coming to Brown, I was a high school teacher. And I had no political ambition until I got to medical school, and I realized that people get sick because of the system that they're in. And I want to fix the system to make it better for people, and I can't make these fixes as a physician. Patients can't afford the medication, can't afford the health care, and I was taught that that's not my problem to deal with as a physician, that I should refer that patient out to a social worker and they'll take care of it. But it is my problem if my patients aren't getting the care that they deserve. And so I want to make healthcare more affordable, and I want to fix the system to improve care for patients, and this is why I'm running for office. I encourage people to look at my ideas. I have lots of specific ideas about education, the economy, and healthcare on how to make things better in this state and in this country. My website is www.stantran.us, and I urge you to take a look at my ideas and see if they'll work for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think one of the things that impresses me about these two young men is that they are young men. Most of the candidates that have I've moderated debates and discussions with are not as young and enthusiastic, and I do think it's probably time for some young blood in Washington. I don't think the office of United States Congressman was ever intended to be a lifetime career. And certainly, people have to give consideration to the fact that there are good young people, men and women, who could serve this state and nation very capably. And both of these gentlemen deserve your support. As you know, many people avoid going out to the primaries in September. This is an important primary because we want to be able to field the best candidates on both parties and even independents who want to come forward. And the way the parties are able to present the best candidates is through the primary process. So I encourage everyone to come out. I congratulate both of you for stepping forward to be a candidate. And this is going to be an interesting experience. I hope it's not the end of your political career, irrespective of the outcome. And we thank you for joining us, and hopefully one of you will be here debating Congressman Cicilline in sometime after September, 5th, I guess, is the primary.
9th, I believe.
The 9th, okay.
Yeah, I certainly hope he comes on and debates one of us.
Yeah.
I hope so too, and we would look forward to welcoming that, and I certainly offer that opportunity to Congressman Cicilline to come forward and debate whichever of these gentlemen comes out of the primary as the winner. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. And please watch the next edition of State of the State.